Welcome everyone and good afternoon. Greg Esterbrooks here in North Bay for the FONOM debate. As the leaders arrive, there's Doug Ford, Stephen Del Duca of the Liberals, Andrea Horvath, of course, of the NDP, and Mike Schreiner of the Green Party of Ontario, all arriving here in North Bay for a historic debate at the Capitol Centre talking about specifically Northern Ontario issues. Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome. I'm Greg Esterbrooks of Your TV, North Bay. Welcome to this historic debate. To my right, Mr. Paul Shotman, who's the Mayor of St. Charles, which is between North Bay and Sudbury, and also the first Vice President of the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities. Paul, on the delegates' minds this afternoon, it's very rare to get the four leaders face-to-face like this.
Oh, definitely, and we're extremely proud that they took time out of their campaign to come to Northern Ontario, to listen to the issues that are in Northern Ontario, and to give us their perspective of what they can do for Northern Ontario.
Obviously, there's a group of red flag or hot button issues you want these leaders to address this afternoon. What are they?
Main one is healthcare and then infrastructure. Those are the big main issues. Healthcare, we know it's shortage of doctors, shortage of specialists, the wait times, all of those issues.
I want to ask you about the price of fuel, because you're in a rural area. I mean, there's diesel has gone way up, regular gasoline has gone way up. It's impacting the biggest cities, but it's also impacting the smaller communities like yours.
Yes, definitely. When you look at the diesel, price of diesel was $1.40 just a couple of months ago. Now you're at $2.40. It impacts the public works. All the heavy equipment runs on diesel. So yes, that is going to have a huge budget impact now.
It goes right down to you. You told me you operate a farm.
Yes, definitely the same thing. On a farming issue, diesel and fertilizer are big inputs that we have to put in, and the costs are just through the roof.
Now, FONOM has been in North Bay for a couple of days for this conference. For the members, for the delegates that are here, what has this conference meant to this group, and to have these leaders here, what has that meant to you and this group?
So for us, it shows that the leaders are willing and listening to Northern Ontario issues. And the delegates are happy to have them here today to do this debate and to hear what they have to say for Northern Ontario.
All right, thank you very much, Paul, appreciate it. We're gonna head now to the stage, and Danny Whalen, who's the president of FONOM, to open the festivities, so to speak. Enjoy the debate.
Welcome, FONOM delegates, and welcome to the members of the public up in the balcony. It's a pleasure to have you, and I welcome you to the 2022 Northern Ontario Leaders Debate. We wish to thank the party leaders for joining us today to listen and respond to questions of regional importance to Northern Ontario. FONOM and our sister organization, Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, asked for and received many more questions than we will have time for today, but we will share the rest of them with the party leaders later on. We have a distinct and unique challenges in Northern Ontario, where approximately 6% of Ontario's population is spread across nearly 90% of the province's landmass. There are 154 municipalities in Northern Ontario. 87% of FONOM's members are being from municipalities with less than 5,000 people. And 55% of our members have a population less than 1,000 people. Today, we share our voices as one, and the province is here to listen. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, an individual who has been in many of our homes and vehicles as host of Morning North, CBC Radio's morning show for Northeastern Ontario. Marcus has been with CBC Radio for more than 30 years, starting in Saskatchewan, then hosting the morning show in Prince George, BC, and for the last 25 years at CBC Sudbury. Marcus says Sudbury is the farthest south he's ever lived. So I'd like to welcome Marcus Schwabe.
Thank you very much, Danny, and good afternoon. Now, this debate is organized by the Federation of Northern Ontario municipalities. The FONOM executive invited input from various groups in the North and, of course, its membership, and came up with 5 questions of interest, in particular to municipalities in Northern Ontario. Now, each leader will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question, the order chosen by random in advance. Then we're going to open up the stage for an open debate and discussion on a related topic, and I'll do my best to keep things orderly and ensure that we hear from all the candidates during those discussions. Now, the candidates are off stage right now. They can hear me, and I ask them to be respectful and to follow my directions. There is a time limit for each question and discussion afterwards, and the candidates will see a yellow paddle raised in the front row when there are 30 seconds to wrap up. And at the end of the debate, each leader will have 3 minutes for closing remarks. So let's welcome our leaders to the stage. Now, the organizers of this debate asked for the parties to provide short biographies to introduce each party leader, which I will read. Stephen Del Duca has fought to improve the communities he lives in and served for 3 decades. As Ontario Liberal leader, Stephen's reinvigorated his party with a strong new team and fresh, innovative ideas focused on making life more affordable, revolutionizing elder care, and rebuilding Ontario schools. With his background promoting workers' rights at the Carpenters District Council, work fundraising for his community hospital, law degree, and time in cabinet, Stephen Del Duca has the experience, plan, and strong team of new Liberal candidates to move Ontario forward and provide the opportunity for a brighter future for all of us. Doug Ford is a builder. As a businessman, he built a successful company. As a Toronto City Councillor, Ford championed building subways and kept costs down for families. As leader of the Ontario PCs and Premier of Ontario, Ford is building roads, highways, and transit for a growing province. He's building a stronger economy with 500,000 more jobs and is attracting game-changing investments to build electric vehicles and batteries right here in Ontario. Ford is passionate about the Etobicoke neighborhood where he grew up. He's a dedicated husband to Carla and a proud father of 4 daughters. Andrea Horvath is the daughter of a unionized auto worker, proud to be born and raised in Hamilton. As a housing advocate, she saw it getting harder to build a good life and wanted to help. She was elected to Hamilton City Council in 1997 and fought hard for people and small businesses. In 2004, Hamilton Centre sent her to Queen's Park, and in 2009, the NDP chose her to lead the party. Andrea is focused on fixing healthcare, making homes more affordable, and finally giving working people the respect they deserve. Andrea is a mom, a Hamiltonian, and she's running to be Premier. And Mike Schreiner. Growing up on a farm, Mike was instilled with a passion for protecting people, animals, and the planet at a young age. Prior to entering politics, Mike was a successful entrepreneur, small business owner, and one of the early advocates of the local food movement. As the leader of the Ontario Greens since 2009, Mike has been active at Queen's Park, working across party lines to be a strong advocate for climate action, local food and water initiatives, affordable housing, protecting Ontario's frontline healthcare workers, small business, and mental health. Mike is also the proud father of 2 daughters. So those are your leaders. And we begin with opening remarks, 1 minute each, and we start with Stephen Del Duca.
Well, thanks very much, Marcus. Good afternoon. I want to begin by thanking President Whalen and Mac and the rest of the team at FONOM for organizing this incredible discussion that I know the 4 of us are going to have on this stage today. And I want to thank all of you for being here, and for those who are watching at home, I want to thank you for tuning in. This is such a pivotal election campaign for the province of Ontario, and I am honored to be participating today and to be leading a new Ontario Liberal team of qualified candidates, women and men from every walk of life, including the North, who are committed to delivering real progress for all of Ontario, including your communities. We are determined to do this in publicly funded education, in healthcare, in the fight against the climate crisis, and in delivering true, genuine economic dignity for workers and their families and for small businesses. And I know that we will not have the province that we can all be proud of unless every region of Ontario, including the North, is at the table as a full partner. That's why in the platform that I announced yesterday, we call it a plan for Ontario to grow. It's a plan that is fully costed, it is fair, it is forward-looking, and it is balanced. And it includes significant measures that will support Northern Ontario, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you in the conversation that we're going to have today. And again, to President Whalen and everybody at FONOM, thank you so much for your leadership. I'm looking forward to this discussion and to partnering with you for years to come. Thank you very much.
Ontario Progressive Conservative Leader Doug Ford.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be in beautiful North Bay, and I just want to thank the Federation and Northern Ontario Municipalities and NOMA for hosting us today. I'm really excited about the future of Northern Ontario, but it's up to each and every one of us to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And the Ontario PC plan is the only plan that's going to have a vision to build the North. We're building Highways 101, we're building Highway 17, we're building the road to the Ring of Fire, and we're bringing back the Northlander. We're the only party saying yes to new jobs in mining and manufacturing and skilled trades. Yes to the biggest investment in mental health in Canadian history. Yes to putting more money back into your pockets. We're reducing the gas tax. We're scrapping the license fee tax. To my friends in Northern Ontario, I'll always be there to listen to you. I'll always have your backs, and let's get it done. Thank you.
Next, NDP Leader Andrea Horvath.
Thanks, Marcus. I'm also very grateful to be here to talk to all of you about the things that matter to Northerners. This is a campaign, this is an election at which there's a lot at stake. I think the question is who's going to finally fix the things that are broken in Northern Ontario. And I know that together we can do that, whether that's a healthcare system, making sure that hallway healthcare and highway healthcare is dealt with, making sure that we tackle that opioid crisis to give hope back to families, bring great jobs to Northern Ontario so young people stay here, as well as make sure that life is more affordable for Northerners, because we know everything is much more expensive here in the North. The current, or I guess the gentleman beside me, Mr. Ford, he spends a lot of time prioritizing his buddies, and it's the rest of us that end up paying the price for that. They get everything they want, and you pay for it. Liberals had 15 years, and they ignored the North. They sold off the Northlander. They sold off Hydro One, or they shut the Northlander down. They sold off Hydro One. They closed schools in your communities. So this time, let's come together and finally fix the things that matter to Northerners. I'm not going to promise the moon and the stars, but I do get Northern Ontario. And I know that after 20 years of Liberals and Conservatives, there's a lot broken. So let's get together and start fixing it.
Next, we have Green Party Leader Mike Schreiner.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you to the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities for bringing us together for this important discussion. It is now or never to address the climate crisis, and we can do it in a way that addresses the cost of living crisis that's only gotten worse over the last 4 years. We need new solutions to old problems. We cannot afford to wait to address the issues that matter to you. The Ontario Green Party are offering those new solutions. The pandemic has revealed the cracks in our systems of care, from our jobs to health care to housing affordability to mental health. The Ontario Greens have a plan, not to paper over those cracks, but to fix the foundation of this province. We know that we can create new career and better job opportunities for people by being a global leader in the new climate economy. We know we can address the housing affordability crisis because people should become before speculators. We know we can address the mental health crisis by making mental health services available through OHIP. And we know that we can address the needs of Northern Ontarians, protecting the people and places we love, building the Northern Ontario each and every one of you want. That's the leadership Ontario Greens provide in this election, and the choice is yours.
So we begin with a question from FONOM. In Ontario, all municipalities struggle with their budgets. Budgets that rely on property taxes to pay for everything from clean drinking water to roads, and those roads and bridges are in need of repair. The only way for municipalities to fund their infrastructure deficit is either by raising property taxes, charging user fees, or by growing and increasing their tax base. Toronto, on the other hand, has the Toronto Act, which gives that city revenue tools that generate nearly $1 billion annually. That's 20% of their revenue. So the first question goes to Doug Ford. Will your government commit to giving all municipalities the same tools that Toronto has, or will you commit to work with AMO to revamp the outdated property tax system in the next 2 years?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I'll tell you, folks, I'll never support increasing taxes. It's very simple as that. My opponents, they love increasing taxes, all three of them. They love regulations, they love increasing taxes, but we have the backs of the municipalities, all 444 of them. During the pandemic, I personally negotiated $4 billion for municipalities. Another $1.2 billion we gave municipalities for the pandemic. You know, I just believe in creating economic development, job creation. We don't need more taxes. We need more people paying taxes. We need more people being employed. Under the previous government, we had lost 300,000 jobs. They drove jobs out of this province propped up by the NDP. As we stand here today, we've created an environment and a climate. We've created the environment of 550,000 new jobs. We have 338,000 more jobs just waiting for people to fill them. We also believe in revenue sharing. You know, our critical mineral strategy is absolutely critical for going out there and creating more revenues, and we're going to share them with the municipalities. The worst thing you could do is take money out of people's pockets, take money out of businesses. We saw what happened in 15 years. Everyone left the province, 300,000 jobs were gone, and people couldn't pay their rent, couldn't pay their mortgages, couldn't put food on the table because of the tax and spend policy under the Liberals and NDP. We're going to make sure that we have a thriving economy, prosperity, the likes of which this province has never seen before.
Thank you, Doug Ford. Same question to Andrea Horvath. Will your government commit to giving all municipalities the same tools that Toronto has?
Thanks for the question. There's no doubt that municipalities have had a raw deal, and particularly in the north, that's really hurt because a lot of your budgets are very small because your population bases are also very small. With the downloading that the Conservatives started in the 90s and that the Liberals didn't deal with after 15 years in government, I know that it's tough, and I know that it's tough to get those culverts and bridges and roads in good repair. And I also know a lot of municipalities aren't able to provide for their residents the kinds of amenities that people want to see in their communities, things like the hockey arena. Things like the community center where kids can get exercise, where seniors can get some socialization. Those things are important to communities. And when I think about what needs to happen in northern communities, I also think about the cost of housing. And I think we all know that the affordability of housing is out of control. And adding more costs to young people that are giving up their dreams already of ever owning a home is really something we need to consider. But we know that folks like doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals need to come to the north, and the way to do that is to make sure you can have the funding necessary. So for us, for me, downloading has got to change to downloading has to change to uploading. We have to upload some of these costs back to the provincial government and truly be there for northern municipalities who deserve to be able to provide their residents with the things that they expect.
Mike Schreiner, same question to you. Will you commit to work with AMO to revamp the outdated property tax system in the next 2 years?
Marcus, I'll give an unequivocal yes. Because we know municipalities, especially northern municipalities, need more autonomy to make decisions and have the revenue tools they need to provide the services their residents want. Every time the province, particularly under the Conservatives, download costs on the municipalities, that means increased property taxes, which is the most regressive form of tax in our province. There's only one taxpayer, Whether they're paying it to the municipality or the province, it's the same people paying the bills. So that's why the Ontario Greens are saying, let's give municipalities more autonomy. Let's have the province step in and be a partner with municipalities by uploading 50% of shelter and housing costs to take pressure off of municipal budgets and help address the housing affordability crisis. Let's upload 50% of transit costs so we can help municipalities better provide reliable, affordable transit for their residents. Let's invest in communities. You know, I asked the Financial Accountability Officer to do a study of the impacts of climate on municipalities. $6 billion just to your budget for buildings alone this decade. It'll even be more when you think of highways and transit and rail lines and other infrastructure. That's why the Ontario Greens are the only party saying we will commit to an $8 billion municipal climate adaptation fund, so those costs do not fall on the backs of property taxpayers, and so that we work together collectively as an Ontario to ensure that no municipality is left behind. No municipality, especially those in the north, don't have the revenue and the resources they need to take care of their residents.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Finally, to Stephen Del Duca, property tax. The system that we have, outdated. What would a Liberal government do to change that?
So look, the short answer to the question is yes, of course, a new Ontario Liberal government would partner with municipalities across the province and, of course, in the north to make sure that the conversation we have about how we fund the services that our families rely upon, a conversation that does need to include the federal government as well, would occur in partnership with municipalities. I'll also point out that in our Ontario Liberal platform, A Place to Grow, we did say that a provincial government led by me would share 5% of the mining tax with northern municipalities. And I've also already committed to undoing the damage that a Conservative government did a generation ago when they downloaded highway, road, and bridge infrastructure to municipalities, including in the north, by having a conversation about which of those pieces of infrastructure should be uploaded. I think about Kenora, where I've had the chance to see exactly how tough it's been for local property taxes to bear the burden of carrying the maintenance costs for that infrastructure. But I also just want to say, I listened to Doug Ford talk a second ago, and it feels to me like he's reading the script from last election campaign. He's served as Premier for the past 4 years, and the sad fact is that over those 4 years, the same number of manufacturing jobs in this province exist today than they did 4 years ago. Spin isn't going to make this province move forward. The key messages aren't. Only real, dedicated, hard work will help Northern Ontario, and that's what Ontario Liberals will do.
All right, let us move on to the open debate. And property taxes, of course, just one bill that we've seen rise in Northern Ontario. I'd like to ask the leaders, what sets your party apart when it comes to making life more affordable? Doug Ford, you can start, but the floor is open.
Well, thank you for that question. There's a clear choice right here, folks. You heard it. They want to put more taxes. They want to take more money out of your pockets. You want to tax the mining industry? How do you think that's going to thrive? You tried that. You tried that last time, Stephen.
No, I know.
And you chased 300,000 jobs out of the province. What we want to do, we want to create the capital of electric vehicles in North America. We have the graphite, we have the nickel, we have the cobalt, we have the lithium right here.
So let's hear from Stephen Del Duca.
They're going to get more revenue. It's going to create thousands of jobs for the people. And that's what's more important than anything.
To be crystal clear about this, so there's no more confusion or cuts or chaos or all the stuff you're hearing from Mr. Ford. What I said a moment ago was that Ontario Liberals would take the existing mining tax that is collected by the province and provide 5% of that back to northern municipalities to support you. But when Doug Ford, absolutely, but here's something that just emerged.
But Stephen, you had 15 years to pay attention to northern communities, and you didn't do any of that. That's part of the problem.
Here is something that just emerged yesterday, which I think is a really scary story for Northern Ontario. Doug Ford talks about critical minerals, and he talks about wanting to create jobs as a result of tackling and going after the minerals that we have. But we learned just yesterday in Windsor, the part of the province where we all want to invest to create jobs that northern communities will support with their minerals, is now at risk of losing a major investment in the EV battery supply chain because Doug Ford and the Conservatives have no plan to produce clean and sustainable electricity for our economy.
All right,
no
the
plan
question was
that's gonna
about
set us back.
affordability, and I'm going to go to
let's talk
Mike
about
Schreiner
affordability. Yeah,
next.
thank you, Marcus. I'll tell you one thing that separates us. Election gimmicks are not going to solve the problems the people of this province need. You know, these three supported the license sticker gimmick. I opposed it because that's billions of dollars that can help fund healthcare, education, better social services. When I talk to people in the North, they're saying to me, we need more access to better healthcare. We need to ensure that our elders are cared for properly in long-term care, which didn't happen during the pandemic. They're telling me their kids need quality public schools. They're telling me they need access to mental health services under OHIP. And every time Mr. Ford says, we're going to take that away from you, that's less money in your family's pockets because you have to pay then out of pocket for those services. So let's ask ourselves, what's the kind of Ontario you want to build? And together, let's build it by sharing those resources and that fiscal
let Andrea
capacity.
Horvath have a word
actually,
on affordability.
I wouldn't mind actually having a bit of a moment to talk to people about how unaffordable life is. I heard a lot of things here, but everyday folks are having a real hard time being able to pay for everyday life here in Ontario. And in the North, as you know, it's much, much more expensive. So our plan includes a number of pieces. Making sure we have a minimum wage that people can build a decent life on, making sure that the costs that are coming out of people's pockets are taken care of, things like dental care, things like prescription drugs, mental health care, making sure you don't have to pay for it with your credit card, you can use your OHIP card, and making sure that yes, the gifts that Northern Ontario has are available to be responsibly, removed from the ground, for example, with mining. But let's bring those processing jobs here. Let's not just move them all to other jurisdictions. Let's not give up on plants like Alstom and Thunder Bay and have the content rules around domestic content scrapped away by the current government or by the former government. These kinds of things are the things that make great jobs in our province, and we have to protect them, not let them be washed away.
We're going to move on to the second question. And again, this is from FONOM. And while it may be nice to rent a lakeside Airbnb or a Verbo accommodation, many municipalities are concerned about the impact they're having. In some cases, it's like having a commercial operation in a residentially zoned neighborhood, threatening a way of life. On top of that, floating accommodations are growing in the North, representing a threat to lakes and waterways, which are not municipally regulated. So, Andrea Horvath, you start with this question. What will you do about the negative effect that short-term rentals and floating accommodations are having on our communities?
Thanks, Marcus. It's definitely the case that folks, particularly folks here who live in Northern Ontario, get that sinking feeling when a couple of RVs roll up with 40 people who are ready to party for the weekend, because it impacts the quality of life of all of you. There's also no doubt that it's really challenging for municipalities who see their units that are so desperately needed by local folks in terms of rental or ownership be bought up by Airbnb or those kinds of companies and not available for people to live in. And again, the regulation of those things is tough, and so for the municipalities to shoulder. So we have a plan to license those short-term rentals, no matter where they are in Ontario, work with municipalities to make sure that they're accountable and that there are consequences to the things that happen in community. And everybody knows when it comes to floating accommodations, those kinds of things can cause even more problems, because everybody knows how much the water amplifies the noise, and people wonder, where does that gray water go? So again, I know the MNR's been doing some work on this with the municipalities, and I'm certainly looking forward to being the partner that sits down with you and them and figures out a solution that doesn't end up costing municipalities a lot of resources that you just don't have.
Mike Schreiner, what would you do about the negative effect that short-term rentals and floating accommodations are having?
Yeah, Marcus, homes are for people and families, not speculators and commercial companies. We have a housing crisis in this province. It is the biggest cost of living crisis that people talk to me across the north and across Ontario. We have to bring in a registry and regulate short-term vacation rentals to ensure that we have enough housing supply for people who live in the north, do the work in the north, provide the jobs in the north. We need to ensure that we properly regulate water homes as well for environmental reasons, if nothing else, but also for quality of life reasons for local residents. We have to ensure safety. We have to also recognize, and I think in the regulatory framework we can do this, that there are some homeowners who do rent out their primary residence, and it is an important source of additional income. And so when I talk about regulating it, it's regulating those speculators and corporations who are buying up homes only to use as short-term rentals. Those homes should be for people. That's why I'm so proud that we're the only party calling for a multiple home speculation tax to drive speculators out of the marketplace, because homes are for people and families, and we have to ensure that everybody in this province has an affordable place to call home in the community they love, near their friends, their families, and where they work.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. And finally, to Stephen Del Duca, short-term rentals, floating accommodations, what would your party do about it?
Well, it's such an important question. Earlier today, I was chatting with Tanya Raybosch, our candidate here in the riding of Nipissing. I heard from her and others at that event about exactly how disturbing the situation is, that the stories being told about people who are coming up from further south here in the province of Ontario and elsewhere, who recognize the incredible natural beauty and all of the amenities that exist here, but are doing it, as both Ms. Horvath and Mr. Schreiner have said, from the standpoint of speculation. And in the midst of what is the worst housing affordability crisis that our province has ever seen, we can no longer allow the simple forces of the free market, as much as I believe in the free market, in the midst of this kind of crisis, to sort through this and still defend what you hold dear, and still preserve the character of your local neighborhoods, your communities, and make housing affordable and accessible for you, or your kids, or your grandkids. So working very closely with municipalities, including, of course, across the north, working with, as was pointed out, the federal government through the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ontario Liberals would want to look for creative ways to make sure that the unique character of your communities is being preserved, while at the same time you're able to access the kind of shelter, the kind of homes that you should be able to have access to through various forms of creative regulation. Thank you.
Doug Ford, what would your party do about short-term rentals and floating accommodations?
Well, first of all, we love Ontario. It's the most beautiful jurisdiction anywhere in the world. We encourage people to come up and spend their money in tourism. We did a tax credit for vacationers anywhere in Ontario, upwards to $400 per family. But I asked the people that are renting, and it's not all big corporations that are out there. These are people that need additional income. Be respectful. Very simple. You don't go there with 30 people and jumping up and down, doing cartwheels. Be respectful. Treat it like your home. But these same people will go into town and they'll go to the restaurant. They'll go into the local stores and generate more jobs and generate more revenue. So, you know something, I always consult with the municipalities, which I have. We have some great representatives running. We have, I believe, 6 mayors running in the north. And I consult with them. I consult with the other mayors. And you can't compare North Bay to Thunder Bay, up to Kenora. Everyone has their own jurisdiction and everything's different. So I'd consult with the municipalities.
We are going to open up now for discussion. And still on the topic of accommodation, I know the price of a home is expensive in Southern Ontario, but prices are going up in Northern Ontario as well. So Andrea Horvath, we'll get you to start this open discussion so anyone can jump in, but what does your party plan to do to make housing more affordable in the north?
You're absolutely right, Marcus. The housing affordability is a crisis all over Ontario and in Northern Ontario as well. And already, young people are walking away from their dreams of ever owning a home. And of course, that means people leave the communities that they love to find something more affordable. In some cases, move great distances away from loved ones, away from a family. So what we need to do is really take seriously the housing crisis. It started under the Liberals. It got worse in the last last 4 years. So we have a number of measures, including helping those first-time homeowners with their down payment, making sure we tame the speculation that Mr. Schreiner was talking about before. These are things that we put out in our housing platform some time ago now.
Mike Schreiner, would you like to jump in?
Crisis. As well, affordable
thanks,
housing
Marcus.
is another piece that I think Mike and I agree on. Affordable housing is necessary for those that can't afford to be in the market.
Thank you, Marcus. So last June, the Ontario Greens put out a housing affordability strategy that the Toronto Stars called a masterclass plan in delivering the solutions Ontarians need. Because we have the ambition and the courage to take on speculation in the housing market. Because we are going to be honest with people about how we can build 1.5 million homes through zoning changes that make it easier to have duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes, tiny homes, secondary suites, a whole range of housing choices for people, so we don't force young families into long, soul-crushing commutes just to afford a place to call home. And quite frankly, in the mid-90s, the provincial government got out of funding nonprofit, co-op, and other community-based housing solutions. We have a costed plan that would get government back into it, committing to building 160,000 deeply affordable homes
Mike, I
across
just want to
the
interrupt.
province,
It's been very
including
quiet
those
on
here.
this side of the
Marcus,
stage.
can I just add one more thing? I'd like to really take exception to Mr. Ford. We all support the tourism industry. There's lodges, there's hotels, there's motels. There's all kinds of accommodations for people in the north to come up here and enjoy the beauty and the community of the north. Let's do that without taking people's homes out of the housing marketplace.
Stephen Del Duca, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ontario Liberal Plan for Housing, first of all, over 10 years, 1.5 million new homes across the province to go right at the heart of the housing affordability crisis, and that would include thousands and thousands of new homes being built right here in Northern Ontario. We would partner with municipalities around limiting or eliminating exclusionary zoning practices, and I'm talking specifically about homes that are 2 stories and contain 3 units. We would go after the speculators because Ontario's mayors have told us and said publicly that there are currently 250,000 at a minimum homes that could be built across this province that have building permits and approvals in place, but landowners and speculators are sitting on those waiting for the prices to go up so they can make more money. This is a crisis. We can't afford that. We would also create the Ontario Home Building Corporation that would unlock current surplus provincial government land to build homes. Would do the same with underutilized strip malls and commercial and industrial properties, again, because of the nature of the crisis that we're facing. And when it comes to the new homes that the Ontario Home Building Corporation would build, or would sell, I should say, those would be limited to first-time home buyers because that's who's facing one of the toughest crunches right now.
Let's hear from Doug Ford. He's been very quiet during this discussion. So, Mr. Ford,
really quickly,
I'm going to move on to Mr. Ford. We're out of time.
Thank you.
But I'd like to hear, does your party have a plan to make housing more affordable in the north?
We actually have a great plan. I'll tell you about it. We have more housing starts in Ontario, over 100,000 last year. That's more than in 30 years. We've sat down with the municipalities and talked to them. We want to make sure we standardize the process right across the board until you can get through the red tape and regulations. You ask anyone to try to build a home, sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years to get approval from the municipalities. Folks, this is economics 101. It's very simple. It's supply and demand. We're going to continue building attainable housing and affordable housing. And if you take 2 to 3 years to get a permit, what do you think happens within those 2 or 3 years? Lumber goes up, steel goes up, labor goes up. Let's get the permits out the door and create more housing. It's a supply and demand issue, and we're going to build more homes than any government in the history of Ontario, which we had last year, over 100,000 housing starts here in Ontario.
All right, we're going to move on now to the next question. And this question is about highways in Northern Ontario that are often closed in the winter because of snowy or icy conditions, and all too often because of collisions. Secondary highways are also in bad shape and pose a safety hazard. So starting with you, Mr. Schreiner, 1 minute on your plan to address the state of our roads in Northern Ontario.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. We absolutely have to improve the state of repair and snow plowing on roads in the north. And I can tell you, previous government that privatized snow plowing The Liberals never changed that, and it's meant higher cost, lower service. We need to fix that. We need to make sure that highways like Highway 11 and 17 are upgraded to Class 1 highways, and that we have public snow plowing on them so they're safe in the wintertime. We need to finish the job on four-laning Highway 69 and have a four-lane highway between Thunder Bay and Nipigon on 11 and 17. Widening our highways throughout the north to make them safer, especially for passing. And we also have to recognize that if we're going to address the affordability challenges drivers are facing, we have to electrify our transportation systems, and we need to roll out charging infrastructure all across the north. You know, it costs me about $5 to fill up my electric vehicle, $15 at a high-speed charger in North Bay last night. Meanwhile, drivers are paying over $100 to fill up their cars with gasoline.
We are going to move on.
Let's have that charging infrastructure on our highways so they can save money.
Stephen Del Duca, Liberal leader. What's your plan to address the state of our roads in Northern Ontario? One minute.
Thanks very much, Marcus. I will agree with Mr. Schreiner. Highways 11 and 17 do need to be upgraded to Class 1 highways for the purposes of winter maintenance. I think that's essential. And our plan, in addition to that, we would finish the job with respect to the twinning or the four-laning of Highway 11 and 17 from Thunder Bay to Nipigon. We would also be looking to four-lane or to complete the four-laning, a project that has gone on for, I know, a number of years, the four-laning of Highway 69. And we want to empower northern residents to be able to make more affordable choices to keep yourselves safe when you are commuting or traveling around the north. That's why we announced that we would create a new tax credit to take $100 off studded winter tires for those living in Northern Ontario. Thank you.
Doug Ford, roads in the north.
Well, thank you. Folks, I've driven these roads in the north, in the far north, and it's terrifying going down those roads, especially in the winter. This year alone, we're doing the largest investment in Ontario history of $640 million in widening roads and twinning roads. We're rebuilding highways 101 through Timmins, twinning Highway 17 from Kenora to Manitoba. We're twinning Highways 11 and 17 between Thunder Bay and Nipigon, widening Highway 69 between Parry Sound and Sudbury, building Ontario's first ever 2+1 highway to improve Highway 11. Mr. Del Duca, you had your opportunity and you failed. You were the Minister of Transportation. You didn't build absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. We made sure that Ontario's consistently beat our snow clearing targets, and including last year, we achieved 98% of provincial standards. Mr. Del Duca, we doubled your performance. 1 in every 4 highway contract area did not meet the provincial standards. You were failing as the Minister of Transportation. You weren't building highways. You weren't clearing the snows. They were more dangerous under your watch. Folks, we're going to build highways. We're going to get it done. We're going to make sure those roads are cleared throughout the winter.
Let's hear now from Andrea Horvath of the NDP on your plan to address the state of roads in Northern Ontario.
Thanks very much, Marcus. I have to say it's pretty interesting when I know that some of the promises that Mr. Ford is making are the same ones that were in his last platform, and he hasn't gotten around to those things, things like Highway 69. Our folks in Queen's Park have been pushing the Ford government for years now, every year that they were in office, to fix the problems with snow removal on northern roads. Why? Because we all know that northern roads are literally your lifelines. I mean, you really can't do much without the northern roads being in not only a good state of repair and adequate and safe, but also safely maintained. So Guy Bergouin put forward a private member's motion to make sure those Class 1, those roads, the Highway 11 and 17, for example, are classified as Class 1. Your transportation minister plugged her ears and didn't want to hear about it. Big highways to mansions in southern Ontario that are going to pave over farmland and wetlands, but help your buddies are not going to help northerners with their winter road maintenance.
We're going to open up the floor now, and I know that Stephen Del Duca, you're itching to address some of the comments made. I'll let you do that. And if we want to add, still with transportation, the Ontario Northlander, passenger rail service, if you each want to jump in about that, but we'll start with you, Steve Del Duca. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let me say on the Northlander, Ontario Liberals on our platform are committed to restoring the rail service to the north.
You broke it in the first place.
We are.
You canceled it.
Well, we are. But
Wow.
can I just? But
10 years later.
Can I please just echo one thing that was said a moment ago? I've stood here so far this afternoon and I've heard Mr. Ford talk as if he hasn't served as Ontario's premier for the past 4 years. Virtually every highway project that he referenced, and you know this, from 1117, which, by the way, my dear friend Michael Gravel fought hard to start the work on, Highway 69 from Parry Sound to Sudbury, work that is well underway.
And none of them are done.
If I can just finish, fixing and dealing with contracts that were poorly structured that date back in terms of privatization for winter maintenance to a previous Conservative government. Here's the bottom line, though, and Ms. Horvath is right about this. Doug Ford wants to spend $10 billion of your money as Northern residents, my money, Ontario's money, to build a highway 60 kilometers on the edge of Toronto that's going to destroy the greenbelt, farmland, and wetlands and save only a handful of commuters mere seconds on their daily trip. That's billions of dollars that we would invest in public education here in the North and beyond, but it's also money that could be allocated to make your life better and more affordable. And why? Why is Doug Ford determined to do that, obsessed to do that? It's not about delivering progress. It's about making the richest, his friends, his political donors, even richer. And he should be embarrassed to step here tonight or this afternoon and talk about Northern highways when he wants to waste $10 billion of your money to reward a select and very wealthy few instead of making your life better in the North.
Well, Mr. Del Duca, very, very simple question. Why did you cancel the Northlander? And Ms. Horvath, you propped them up. You propped them up, so you were supporting canceling the Northlander, and you canceled it. Why did you cancel it?
So really quickly.
Marcus, could I just ask a quick question here?
Yeah,
Mr. Ford is right about that.
It's a direct
but I have a
question.
question for Mr. Ford.
Yeah.
Will you actually bring back the Ontario Northlander? You
promised it last time.
promised that in your last platform
time.
and didn't deliver.
4 years.
We need the Northlander, and we also need expanded bus service from Ontario Northland for intercity bus connections. Are you actually going to do it this time or not?
We're actually the only government that's bringing back the Northlander. I was up there. I was actually on the train, and we're moving forward with the Northlander. And you know, I want to get credit to the hometown boy here, Vic Fideli. He's been preaching about this Northlander from day one. We're getting the job done. The difference is, folks, we're spending $157 billion on infrastructure. We're building roads, we're building highways, we're building bridges. Ms. Horvath, you'd be out in the middle protesting with protest signs on the highway with all your protesters because you're anti-development, you're anti-infrastructure. I'm about getting it done. I'm about building this province.
You're about your buddies, Doug.
And that's exactly what we're going to do.
Andrea Horvath, go ahead. Andrea.
We've watched the movie before, and Mr. Del Duca seems to have deja vu all over again here. They closed schools in Northern Ontario, making your kids go from the school they were used to a school a couple of towns over on buses for very long trips. That's what Stephen Del Duca's Liberals did. They closed the Northlander. They sold off Hydro One. He wants to say that they're a new party now, and I get it. He doesn't want anybody looking in the rearview mirror because they left a wreck back there in Northern Ontario. But Doug Ford has had 4 years, and things have gotten worse. He promised the Northlander. It's not here. He promised Highway 69. It's not here. The road maintenance continues to be literally a death trap for people. I've talked to so many Northerners who say that the long-awaited medical appointment that they finally had, because they can't get service here in the North, they couldn't go. They had to cancel because the highway was closed because his government refused to maintain the highways at a level that anybody else in Ontario would expect.
Okay,
but
we
somehow
have to move on.
not Northerners. Not Northerners.
We need to move on to the next question from FONOM. Now, people may not realize that much of Northern Ontario has very little to no provincial emergency support, such as police, EMS, even MTO. So that leaves local fire departments, in many cases volunteer fire departments, to act as first responders, and sometimes the only responders to emergencies. Now, many departments are expecting fewer volunteers because of retirements, And municipalities are concerned with the new firefighter certification regulations that could make it harder to recruit and retain volunteer firefighters. So, Stephen Del Duca, are you prepared to rescind the firefighter certification regulations? And if not, what will your government do to support communities, particularly those that may no longer be able to provide fire protection services due to the certification changes?
Well, thanks very much for the question, Marcus, and FONOM for the question. So I think it's really important to say as a first principle that I know no one here in this room, no one watching at home or across the north, or I should say we all want to support safer and healthier communities. We know that our first responders, our fire services, and so many others, in particular over the last couple of years, which have been so difficult for them, difficult for everyone on the front lines, deserve support. They deserve to be kept safe and healthy and to be able to come back home to their loved ones at the end of the day. And so, therefore, training standards and certification are so important to make sure that they're able to do exactly that, keep us safe and keep themselves safe. But there is equally no doubt that many municipalities, in particular our smaller municipalities here in the north, face a pretty big uphill battle with respect, or uphill challenge with respect to finding the funding in order to make sure that the certification standards are met, and at the same time they can be kept whole fiscally, if you know what I mean, the municipalities. That's why an Ontario Liberal government, as I said earlier, in response to the issues relating to revenue sharing and revenue tools, would work closely, in particular with the smallest municipalities who will face a big challenge, to make sure that we're able to meet the standards to keep ourselves safe in all of our communities, and at the same time not be taking a very tough fiscal position and making it dramatically worse. It's about partnership, it's about collaboration, and supporting community safety together.
Doug Ford, what would your party do to support communities that may not be able to provide fire protection services because of these certification processes?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all the first responders, especially the last couple of years. They've done an incredible job, and no one supports those first responders more than I do. They know it, and I know it. No matter if it's the firefighters, the paramedics, or the police. When it came to the firefighters, the Liberals had a one-size-fits-all. You know, it's the downtown Toronto approach. And we just took a different approach. So these firefighters would have to send 2 or 3 of their platoon members a 14-hour drive or 16-hour drive to one area to get trained. We took a different approach. We took a mobile unit, and we're going from town to town, and we're training the whole platoon. And instead of taking the downtown Toronto approach, and the last time I checked, I haven't seen any 40, 50-story buildings in the north. So, you know, we have to be what the community wants, focus on what they need, no matter if it's car extraction to get certified on that, or exterior fires versus interior fires. But I'll tell you, to the firefighters, I'll have your backs all the way. I'll take care of the municipalities. If there's additional burden on the backs of the small municipalities, I'll give you my word, we're going to take care of the municipalities, and we're going to take care of the firefighters. They're all absolute champions, in my opinion.
Andrea Horvath, are you prepared to rescind the firefighter certification regulations?
Thanks, Marcus. One of the things I think that is clear is this regulation is yet another cookie-cutter approach that doesn't work for northern communities. And so when we look at firefighters, there's not a single firefighter that I've ever met that isn't committed to not only the safety of the communities that they protect, but also the safety of their colleagues. But when it comes to the regulation, we have communities in Northern Ontario that are very small, and they're completely serviced by volunteer firefighter folks who are already usually working full-time somewhere else. I think of Elk Lake. 500 people live in Elk Lake. It's an entirely volunteer force. About 198 northern communities are completely volunteer. So what we need to do is make sure that we're building regulations that keep everybody safe, that keep firefighters safe, but also make sure that the fire protection is available in the northern communities. And so it's not a cookie-cutter approach. It shouldn't be a cookie-cutter approach. It should be an acknowledgement of the particular needs of northerners and making sure we're working with local communities, local fire chiefs about how to make sure the training is there, but also the coverage is there and the safety is there for their
Mike
firefighters.
Schreiner on firefighter certification regulations.
Yeah, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate firefighters and all first responders especially over these challenging last 2 years. And we absolutely have to make sure that firefighters are safe. We do need minimum safety standards to ensure you come home at the end of the day, to ensure that you have the skills and the training and the support to protect the people you love in the communities you live. You know, I fought against Mr. Ford closing the Ontario Fire College in Gravenhurst. I thought it was a huge mistake. Our candidate in Parry Sound Muskoka, Matt Richter, and I said, you know what? This is a vital resource for training for firefighters across the province, especially in the north. And we know now that the privatization of these regional training centers are actually increasing the cost for municipalities and may actually deter people from going into becoming firefighters, especially volunteer firefighters. So we need the province to step up with funding and financial support to support those municipalities. And I want to close, I know I only have a couple minutes here, but this is for folks in the south. Last summer, 793 hectares of northwestern Ontario was on fire. That's the size of the Greater Toronto Area, to put that into perspective from folks. The largest fire season in the history of this province. The climate crisis is here, and we have to ensure that the people are there to protect us, have the tools and resources and training to get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. I'm going to pivot here a little bit for the open debate, because perhaps the biggest emergency the province has had to deal with is the pandemic. So, Doug Ford, how would you rate your government's performance during the pandemic? And for the other leaders, what, if anything, would you have done differently? Mr. Ford.
Well, first of all, you know something, there was a lot of challenges. We were going around the clock, and I just want to thank our frontline healthcare workers and everyone from the grocery store clerks and the truck drivers that were delivering goods. I've never, ever seen the Ontario spirit come together like I saw under this pandemic. And I'll tell you, folks, there were some challenging times and really tough decisions. I remember one time when it first started, and you really find out who your friends are around the world, and it's every country for themselves, make no mistake about it. And the pandemic preparedness from the previous government, when I went into the storage room to find out we didn't have any PPE, and I'll never forget that I went out there and I called out for help for the companies all around Ontario. In 2 days, 26,000 companies came up. 2 days, and we stood up a whole sector within a couple months. We were producing our own PPEs, we were producing face shields, and
so
distillers
obviously
were
you think you did a great job. Mike Schreiner,
Well,
you were in the
I think
legislature.
The people of Ontario
How
did
would
a great
you
job.
characterize the government's response to the pandemic?
You know, Marcus, in the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of cooperation and collaboration among all four parties at Queen's Park. It was actually one of our best moments as a province. And that started to break down when the government wasn't following the science and the data to the extent that it should have. And it's unfortunate, because I felt like we were in a moment we could take politics out of the decisions. But when the chair of the science advisory table said, if you open up too fast, it's going to lead to a disaster. And that's exactly what happened in the spring of 2021. And then the government's response was to bring back karting and close down playgrounds. And so those types of judgments, I think, were wrong. And if we had had a vision of how we could put goals out there, what we were all working together for, and continue to follow the science, follow the data, be transparent with people about the decisions that were being made, I think we could have maintained that four-party unity to get us through the biggest crisis this province has ever faced.
Andrea Horvath?
Thanks, Marcus. I just want to start by acknowledging and agreeing with pretty much everything that Mike just said, but also it's important to acknowledge and recognize just how many people lost so much in this pandemic. There was a lot of tragedy. There were a lot of people who lost their dreams, small businesses that papered up their windows forever, families who lost loved ones, tragic deaths in long-term care, and we saw parts of the province that got ignored by the government. Let's just take a moment, though, to recognize that over 4,400 seniors lost their lives in long-term care because this government, this Premier, when he was in office, promised an iron ring around long-term
And
care.
what would you have
that
done
never
differently?
Showed up. And so I would have been protecting the seniors in long-term care, hiring 10,000 PSWs like Quebec did, like BC did, but Mr. Ford didn't want to spend the money. I've kept the schools open by making sure that we were reducing class sizes, making sure that testing was available, and getting our kids a chance to learn. In Ontario, children in this province had the longest amount of time out of school of anyone in North America.
I want Doug Ford to respond, and then we'll go to Stephen Del
to
Duca.
support our kids.
You know something,
We'll come to you.
I'm a little shocked and disappointed what I heard from my two colleagues. While we were in a full-out battle, we were working collaboratively with all 444 municipalities. We were able to stand up the PPE. We were able to get 3M. I went after President Trump like no one ever went after him because he cut us off with 3M. And you know something? We worked with the federal government. Your counterparts, Mr. Del Duca, worked with us hand in glove, nonstop. I was on the phone every single night with the Deputy Prime Minister, working and collaborating together. And you know something? Everyone pitched in. And if you want to look at the numbers, you look at the sheer numbers. We were leading in every single category in North America, supporting everything we could do. We were throwing billions of dollars supporting small businesses. And as for the long-term care, we were creating 30,000 new long-term care beds under the Liberals in 15 years, folks. 600 long-term care beds. We've created 30,000. We're hiring 27,000 new PSWs. We've hired 8,000 new healthcare workers.
All right.
We've put more money into
Ford,
healthcare than ever in the history of this province. $76 billion versus their $61 billion. You prop them up.
Let's hear from the Liberal leader, Stephen Del Duca. Last word on
well,
this
thanks
topic.
so much. So first of all, let me just say, some valid criticisms were raised, constructive and valid criticisms by Ms. Horvath and Mr. Schreiner. And I listened closely as Mr. Ford talked about collaboration amongst levels of government, which I will say here, I think is a very good thing. And I think we can all afford to see more of that. So criticisms were already levied here today. I would echo those. But let me just talk about where we go as a province from here. Because surely by now there should have been lessons that we've all learned, not in a partisan way, but we've learned as 15 million people who call this province home about our own ability to face capacity challenges, our own ability to build up our resilience. So for example, in our platform, we have the call for a public inquiry into the COVID response, not to lay blame. I want to be clear about this, not to lay blame, but to draw out the lessons that will help us collectively prepare for whatever challenge comes next. We've also included the desire to create what I call a pandemic resilience hub so that we do have the capacity on an ongoing basis to build out the PPE, the vaccine research and development, so that reports back into the legislature. So it's not simply to one government to the other, but every member in the legislature in a transparent way learns about how we collectively remain accountable. Because whether, God forbid, it's another pandemic or it's the climate crisis or a natural disaster, this province needs to be ready on an ongoing basis in the strongest way possible to be resilient. It's what the people of this province deserve.
Hey,
Mr. Del Duca.
It is actually what they deserve, but I do have to say, you didn't learn the lessons from SARS. It was your government that didn't restock the PPE, and long-term care was on its knees when Mr. Ford's government took over. That's how the long-term care became so vulnerable. Now,
quick response, Mr. Del Duca.
He was cutting when he took office, but that's why we need to make sure we're investing in the things that people really need,
20 seconds.
like home care and long-term care.
Marcus, I just
have to say, lessons that need to be learned, and Mr. Schreiner pointed this out and he's right. The ability to collaborate, the ability to work together and find consensus on issues that are this fundamental, your health and safety, should go beyond partisan politics throughout the year, but even on a stage in the middle of an election campaign. And that's what I and the new Ontario Liberal team are committed to delivering
Mike
for
Schreiner,
you.
go ahead. Really short.
Yeah, Marcus, I just want to really quickly say that one lesson we have learned is supply chains when it comes to medical supplies. I will give Mr. Ford credit. He came to my riding in Guelph and we opened Medline, which is going to supply more PPE. But now I'm going to ask Mr. Ford, will you stand up for nurses and PSWs and frontline healthcare workers and commit to removing the wage restraint on them, because we've all four
right,
called them
we'll let
heroes.
Doug Ford respond to that,
Can we do
because
that? Can we do that?
we're going
Work
over here.
together on that one, Marcus.
Go ahead, Mr. Ford. Would you like to respond?
Well, I'd love to respond. We have a strong plan. We're the only government that has a plan. We created 3,100 more acute care beds than we've ever had. We're investing $40 billion, with a B, $40 billion, building new hospitals and revamping hospitals right across this province. We have never, ever seen that. Now let's talk about the PSWs. Under the previous Liberal government, propped up by the NDP, they ignored the PSWs. They're the hardest working, underpaid people I've ever seen throughout this pandemic.
It's like you haven't been
we
Premier
made
for
sure
4
that they
years.
have a $3 an hour
It's
increase.
like you haven't been
And
Premier
let's
for
talk
4
about
years.
the great nurses that we have that helped all of
The
us
great
throughout the
nurses
pandemic.
are leaving their
The great
profession because of your
nurses, actually, the
disrespect.
great
Beds are
nurses, we
great,
gave
but without
Can I-
healthcare
can I finish
providers,
my-
beds are nothing.
All right,
We
we're gonna
need
move on.
healthcare
We're gonna
providers
move
at
on.
We
the
actually
bedside,
gave the
and you've been
nurses a
disrespecting them. And we have a
$5,000
human
retention
resources crisis.
pay. I call it a thank you, a 7.6% increase.
They want a
There's no
raise.
province
All
in the
right.
entire country
Thank you,
that
Mr.
gave their
Horvath.
nurses a
You're keeping their wages
7.6%
low.
Thank you, Ms.
increase.
Horvath.
I love our nurses.
Keeping
I love
their
our
wages
PSWs.
low.
All right.
deserve a raise.
Last topic is related to healthcare, and that's the last question. Your responses initially, if you can keep them to less than a minute because we're running tight for time. But I have this preamble about FONOM commissioning the Northern Policy Institute to look at the state of mental health, homelessness, and addictions in Northern Ontario. And here's a quote from that report. We face unique challenges compared to the rest of the province, which the provincial government must consider before establishing a new standardized and centralized system of care. While the roadmap to wellness addresses many addictions and mental health issues in Northern Ontario, the implementation and delivery of these services must look different in the North for them to be effective. And the report goes on to say, there is robust support in Northern Ontario to establish a Northern Centre of Excellence for mental health and addiction. So starting with you, Doug Ford, will your government establish a Northern Centre of Excellence for mental health and addiction?
Well, as soon as I came into office, this issue is extremely important to me. It's personal to me. I've seen addiction in my family. I understand what the families go through. And when they have someone addicted to any, be it alcohol or drugs. But I'll tell you what we created. We created the first minister of mental health and addictions. We made the largest investment in Canadian history of $3.8 billion. We increased the funding from the previous government for mental health and addiction by 30%. We also were investing $13 million to support Indigenous mental health. And I'll tell you, Michael Tabola, our minister, has been all through the North with the First Nations communities supporting them. We invested $30 million to build 224 addiction treatment beds. Folks, I can't stress this enough. The addiction treatment beds are the most important area that we could support people. Right here in North Bay, we created 53 beds in North Bay, 15 new beds in Timmins, 34 new beds in Thunder Bay, and 15 new beds in Sudbury. We need a wraparound system that's going to help people when they go in, and they can see the nurse, they can get counseling, they can get a meal. Folks, this is serious. We're putting every resource we have into helping people with mental health and addictions.
Andrea Horvath,
Thanks,
what will
Marcus.
your government establish?
What Mr. Ford forgot to mention is that one of the first things he did was cap the number of safe consumption sites in Ontario and put people's lives at risk. It's heartbreaking. The opioid crisis has been rolling through Northern Ontario for some time now. Back in 2020, there were 51 people that lost their lives to an overdose in Sudbury. 4 people lost their lives last week. Today, there are now over 238 people since 2020 that have lost their lives to an opioid overdose or to a drug overdose. There's a crisis happening, and this government cut $330 million from mental health when they took over. They stopped those sites from being increased to try to save lives. What our plan does is reverse all of that. We know that we can save lives by making those investments, by being there with rehab beds, with detox beds, with services that support people afterwards. Our plan includes transitional housing as well as supportive housing, so that when people start to be able to rebuild their lives, they can have the supports and an affordable place to live, to have a decent future. There's a lot that needs to be done, ignored and made worse by this government, Mr. Ford's government, and certainly we're committed to working with you to fix the opioid crisis and over addictions crisis, rather, that we know your towns are facing.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Mike Schreiner, will your government, a Green government, establish a Northern Centre of Excellence for Mental Health and Addiction?
Yes, Marcus. And I want to be clear that everything is not okay when it comes to the mental health and addictions crisis we're facing in Ontario right now. The substance use deaths are 3 times higher in Northern Ontario than they are in the South. Sean Mclaughlin, our candidate here, is a frontline mental health and addictions worker here in North Bay. And he's talked to me about the fact that, you know, the consumption and treatment site in Sudbury didn't get the funding it needed, even though the crisis on a per capita basis is worse in Sudbury than any other community. That's why we need to make OHIP, mental health services, available and funded through OHIP, so everyone can access the care they need. That's why we need to expand harm reduction services and to declare opioid use a public health emergency. But Marcus, it's also why we have to address the social determinants of health, like poverty. We're the only party in Ontario calling for doubling the rates that people on disabilities receive, because they're living in legislative poverty right now. We're calling on 160,000 deeply affordable homes to be built across this province, including 60,000 with wraparound mental health and addictions and other supports, and a commitment to 4,000 support, even 6,000 deeply affordable specifically for the North. And on top of that, 14,000 homes that are Indigenous owned and Indigenous led, because healthcare providers tell us that if we're going to solve this crisis, we have to end poverty and we have to make housing first.
Let's hear from Stephen Del Duca of the Liberal Party.
Well, thanks very much. I mean, I've heard this from all of you, from the mayors and other municipal councillors and small business owners that I've had the chance over the past couple of years to speak with directly about exactly how scary the crisis is with respect to mental health and addictions, particularly around the opioid crisis. I know it's already been discussed by others on the stage, but there is no doubt that there needs to be more invested, and an Ontario Liberal government would, in supportive housing, deeply affordable housing. By the way, working in partnership with municipalities, providing, in the case of our platform, $360 million in ongoing annual funding to not-for-profits and municipalities to create the wraparound services that we talk about so frequently. I think it's so important for the Opioid Emergency Task Force, which was created several years ago, which, sad to say, hasn't had a single meeting over the past 4 years, to once again be reestablished, to be reactivated, so working together, we can have a genuine conversation about what targeted and broad-based investments need to be delivered. Our plan also includes $3 billion in new funding over 4 years for the mental health crisis that we are facing right across the board, and a significant amount of that overarching investment would flow to communities here in the North. But the original question about a Northern-specific Centre of Excellence, I believe that is a discussion that has merit, and an Ontario Liberal government would be happy to have that with you in order to look at making it happen. Thank you.
We're going to open up the stage to just have a discussion about what other changes are needed to improve healthcare in Northern Ontario. Doug Ford, what else should be done, do you think, to improve health in the North?
Well, first of all, I just want to follow up on the mental health and addiction. I take this very seriously. We dedicated a minister. We had the largest funding in Canadian history, $3.8 billion. We increased it by 30%. And what we're doing with healthcare, we're putting more money into healthcare than any government in the history of this province, in this country. Under the Liberals, they were spending about $61 billion. They were fighting with the doctors nonstop. You know, the difference between them and what we're doing, we're putting in $14 billion more. That's almost a 20% increase. We're building new hospitals right across this province. We're hiring thousands of nurses. There's more than 5,000 nurses have been hired, 8,000 healthcare workers, 27,000 PSWs. We don't just talk about it, we get the job done. You know, it's easy to sit there and throw out these figures and everything. You look at the numbers, look at the budget. We just put forward an incredible budget, folks. I encourage you to look under the health budget and just go back a few years. Under when Ms. Horvath was running the province along with Mr. Del Duca. That's where they brought us to the brink.
getting old, Doug. It's getting
They
old.
brought the
Stage is open
healthcare,
for
they
discussion.
brought the healthcare
Marcus,
sector
Marcus, I
to
just
the
want to
brink.
say,
Folks,
I
you can
want to
talk
say
to
to the
NC.
Let's hear from Mike Schreiner.
28,000, I want to say to the 28,000 young people who are on a wait list to access mental health services right now, that averages 18 months, sometimes 2.5 years. I've had painful and gut-wrenching conversations about parents desperate to access mental health services for their children. And then when they're able to access them, they can't afford it. That's why we need to make mental health services available under OHIP. That's why we need to have the funding commitment in place, which the Greens have made, to reduce youth wait times to mental health services to less than 30 days. That's our future, folks.
So let's hear from Stephen Del Duca now.
So, you know, So I know we're talking about healthcare, mental health care, but also healthcare generally speaking. I just wanted to also convey that in the Ontario Liberal plan that we did unveil yesterday, there are other additional measures that we would bring forward as a government to help support better access to healthcare here in Northern Ontario. Number one, we would raise the admission caps on the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. Number two, we would actually waive or get rid of tuition for medical and nursing students who make a commitment to actually work in rural and remote Ontario for an extended period to help them get through school and come to your communities to provide the medical care and the access that you deserve, both in mental health care and in general health care, if I can put it that way. We will also deliver on 15 new community health centers, including some in the north, more nurse practitioner-led clinics, and supporting and funding more family health teams, which is why we can make the commitment that regardless of where you live in this province, including right here in Northern Ontario, you will, under an Ontario Liberal government, have access to a nurse practitioner or a doctor, regardless of your postal code, within 24 hours. These are investments that will make meaningful progress for you here in Northern Ontario as it relates
Andrea
to
Horvath, we haven't heard from you on this.
Thanks very much, Marcus. I'm glad Mike talked about the OHIP card being used to get mental health services. That's certainly one of our ideas, and we're prepared to do that because people shouldn't be waiting. Kids shouldn't be waiting 18 months to get the mental health services that they need. But we know what's happening here in Northern Ontario. Red Lake had to close its emergency ward. I got a call from Mayor Moda, and he was beside himself because they had to close their emergency ward because the former government of Mr. Ford's didn't pay attention to the mess that was left by Mr. Del Duca and his team. After squeezing hospitals and bringing us hallway medicine, things have gotten worse. And that's a problem for Northerners. There are 13 Northwestern, particularly chiefs of staff, who penned a letter to his government to beg for some attention. They laid out a number of recommendations, and I can proudly say they're all in my platform because Northerners deserve access, equal access to health care. So not only that, but we need to fix the Northern Travel Grant. I don't know how many times I've heard about the Northern Travel Grant not being properly administered, not being properly provided. 14-day minimum guarantee of, or maximum guarantee of that travel grant refund coming in. Absolutely, mental health and addictions, as I've already mentioned, detox beds, rehab beds. The bottom line is, with these two guys, the healthcare access for Northerners has gotten worse and worse and worse. 15 years with Mr. Del Duca, 4 years with Mr. Ford. It's time to fix Northern healthcare. We can do it if we prioritize your healthcare, and that's exactly what an NDP government is going to do.
Mr. Ford.
Well, you know something, we're actually doing that. We're the only government that's going to pay for the education of nurses. Full stop. We're going to pay for their full education if they go and practice in rural areas. Under the Liberals, propped it up by the NDP, we didn't have enough doctors. We increased undergrads and postgrads by over 360 more doctors. We did the first medical school in 10 to 15 years. We're building a new school with Ryerson. We're pouring money into healthcare, into HHR, Health Human Resources, the likes of which the province has never, ever seen. All you have to do is if you call up any CEO, I don't care what hospital it is, and ask them if they've had more love, more attention, more contact, direct phone number to me, every single one of them, my personal cell number.
Hey,
just ask them who supported them the most. I'll tell you, they're going to say the PC government. It was a disaster under the Liberals and NDP. Absolute disaster.
Thank you all for being part of this debate. We now have closing comments, and because we're over time, if you can limit your comments to 2 minutes, you will get an indication from the front row when your time is up. So we're going to go in reverse order. Closing remarks from Mr. Mike Schreiner.
Well, thank you, Marcus, and thank you to the Federation of Ontario, Northern Ontario municipalities for hosting this debate today. And I want to thank my colleagues for being a part of the democratic process and all of you for being a part of the democratic process. We need new solutions to old problems. We cannot afford to wait to address the challenges we face. When I walked into this debate hall, I walked through a line of nurses. They're the backbone of our healthcare system. And they want a wage increase. Like their wages have been capped at 1% when inflation is 6%. Like imagine, that's the backbone of public health care. We have to treat the people who care for us with the dignity and respect and the wages they deserve. That's what building a caring society looks like. We have to build connected communities where people can actually afford to live in the community they love, near where they work, so they're not forced into long, expensive commutes, so they can spend time with their family and their friends. We need to be ready for the new climate economy because Northern Ontario can lead it. Northern Ontario can lead it in mining and mining to manufacturing strategy and forestry. We can retrofit buildings to help you save money by saving energy and create thousands of jobs in the construction and trades in the north. But we have to start voting for new solutions and a new party who can deliver on that. And we know that that's what Ontario Greens are doing because we know that's the Northern Ontario you want to build, and we're ready to provide the leadership to build the Ontario you want.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Next, Andrea Horvath of the NDP.
Thanks very much, Marcus. I just want to say straight up that my commitment to Northerners has never wavered and it will never waver. You deserve your fair share, and we together can make sure that the things that have been broken will be fixed, like hallway and highway medicine. We're going to hire 300 doctors, 100 specialists, make sure healthcare workers are able to come to the north and serve your communities. We're going to fix, as I mentioned, the Northern Health Travel Grant, so down to 14 days guaranteed. We're going to take action on the mental health crisis that you're facing, deal with folks who are suffering with addictions. The opioid crisis has got to be dealt with, and we know we can tackle that crisis. And we will be providing mental health services with your OHIP card, not your credit card. We will deliver broadband by 2025 in all Ontario communities, unlike the broken promise of Mr. Ford, and not with just big fish companies that are the buddies of Doug Ford, with the small and medium-sized providers as well. Jobs that pay the bills, training for workers so that the next generation of Northerners can stay here and build a great life here. We will absolutely bring the Northlander into service. We've been fighting this since 2012 when the Liberals canceled it. It needs to be reinstated. And we need to do all of these things with the needs of Francophone communities at the top of mind and the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples and communities as part of our process. My commitment to you is very clear. Instead of having a premier that works for his buddies, you can have a premier that works for you. And I think it's high time that that happens for Northern Ontario. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech.
Mr. Doug Ford of the Progressive Conservatives.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank my colleagues here on the stage. I want to thank the moderators, and I especially want to thank everyone watching on TV. The choice the voters face, it couldn't be any clearer here in Northern Ontario or across the province, has never been more clear. If you want more excuses, more delays, more talk, and more taxes, I'll tell you folks, you have a lot of choices, a lot of options in this election. You can either choose the Liberals that want to take us back, or you can vote for the NDP that want to hold us back. But if you want to get it done, you have one choice, and that's the Ontario PCs. We're the only party with a real plan, a real vision to build Northern Ontario and the rest of the province. A real plan to build highways and key infrastructure, including right here in Northern Ontario. A real plan to keep costs down for Northern families and put money back into your pocket instead of the government's pocket. Friends, it's time to get it done. It's time to get it done for Northern families and business who rely on high-speed internet. And by the way, the bids that went out, we're getting that built, and that's going to be done by 2025, high-speed internet right across this province, $4.2 billion. It's time to get it done by investing in highways like Highways 101 and Highway 17. It's time to get it done by bringing back the Northlander that both the NDP and Liberals canceled. And it's time to get it done by building the road to the Ring of Fire. We're the only party with a team that has a vision and has a plan. On Election Day, on June the 2nd, I'm asking for your vote. Thank you, and we're going to get it done. Thank you.
Stephen Del Duca of the Liberal Party.
Well, thanks very much, Marcus. Great job, as always, moderating. I want to thank FONOM, NOMA, everybody who's here with us today, and of course those who are watching from home. So I'm going to finish out my remarks today. I didn't get the chance to talk about this earlier, just to give you a quick understanding of why I'm here, why I'm in this fight, why I came back to politics. I think often about my family on this campaign trail. My wife and I are raising two daughters. They're in grade 9 and grade 5, attending publicly funded schools where we live. I think about my parents. Mom and Dad came from different parts of the world, like so many Canadians. They're in their 80s now. They're aging. They're still at home, thank goodness. They do experience some challenges from time to time. I think about the magic of Ontario, where we all, each and every successive generation, has a fundamental obligation to honor the sacrifice and the legacy of those who came before us, our parents and grandparents who gave us everything, built everything for us, and to honor that sacrifice by setting up the next generation for success. And I refuse to accept that my parents' sacrifice should be squandered and that my daughters should have less opportunity growing up in this province than I did a generation ago. That's why the new Ontario Liberal plan will invest in publicly funded education everywhere. Grade 13 is an option, smaller class sizes, better school buildings, healthcare, in particular seniors care, that lets people like my parents and many of you here in this room stay at home for life and have real dignity. Puts workers and their families at the center of the decision-making processes that we make, and supports the mom and pop small business entrepreneurs that give all of our communities the character that we love. This is a positive, forward-looking plan for Ontario's future, for Northern Ontario's future, and you have my commitment that I will work as hard as I can, relentlessly in fact, to deliver the kind of Ontario I want my daughters to grow up in, I want your kids and grandkids to grow up in. You have my word that I will be relentless in the pursuit of this progress for every part of Ontario, including, of course, the North. Thank you very much for having me here today.
And thank you to all the leaders, and thank you for being here and for watching and being engaged in politics in Ontario. It is up to you to make a decision next month on the government you would like to see take us forward in Ontario and in Northern Ontario. Thanks to the folks at FONOM for inviting me to be the moderator this afternoon, and I'd like to call upon the FONOM president, Danny Whalen, for the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Marcus. Doesn't he do a wonderful job? I'm sure even the party leaders would agree. To each of you party leaders, I want to give you our thanks on behalf of NOMA and FONOM. We could hear the passion in your voice as you defended your platform, and I greatly appreciate that and the time you've shared with us here in the North. I also want to apologize to whichever party will form the next government, because the day you're sworn in, I shall be in your face. Not, no, just a minute. Not as a whiner, not as a complainer, but someone who wants to work in partnership with Queen's Park to unleash the full potential of Northern Ontario.
You're here.
So I put you on notice that I'll be knocking on your door. Good luck to all of you, and I greatly appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Delegates.
Thank you.
I want to thank the members of the public that are up top and all of the delegates. Check your agenda. The buses will be available for you. And of course, the leaders, there shall be an opportunity for a scrum should you wish to participate. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.